afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Tech UK webinar. My name is Sue Daly. I'm the Director for Technology and Innovation here at Tech UK, and it's my absolute pleasure to be your chair and I suppose your companion for the next hour. We're really thrilled to be bringing you this webinar today, Tech UK webinar sponsored by Hyperscience, where we're going to be discussing harnessing AI with human in the loop, a new era of automation for UK public sector. Of course, AI, the hot topic right now that everyone wants to talk about. And at Tech UK, we're doing a lot of work focusing on a lot of different issues around AI right now. But one of the key areas we're focusing on is what this means for different industries and different sectors. And of course, what this new era of automation for UK public sector, what it could mean is a key topic and a key focus if we realize the potential of this technology. So we've got a fascinating, and I think it's going to be quite thought-provoking webinar today. I'm going to be talking about the future of public services in the AI era that we are all now living in. And also we're going to spotlight and learn more about Hyperscience's transformative automation technology. We're going to be looking at current trends and the future prospects of AI in public services. We're going to deep dive into data foundations, transformational AI projects. We're also going to have time for exchange and sharing of ideas and views through a Q&A today. So we've got some amazing speakers that are going to help kick off the discussion. But then please, throughout the presentations and the sessions, use the Q&A function to pop in any thoughts, pop in any questions. Then when we come to the Q&A session towards the end of our hour, I will read through and bring in those questions. So please, pop them in as they come to your mind. Of course, be aware that everybody else on the session can see those Q&As and comments. But please, we want your questions and we want your input as we go. So I am going to now hand over to our speakers. We have got three great speakers in no particular order. Joining me today are Chris Bloomfield, Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at Hyperscience. We've also got James McGee, Senior Manager for Capgemini. Great to have you with us, James. Thomas Redhead, who's the Account Executive for Hyperscience, and some amazing people for you to listen to, for you to learn from for this really important and very timely conversation, I think, which I'm sure will start a lot more conversation to come. So kicking us off, and please, as I said, and if you've just joined us, pop in any Q&A or any questions for the speakers as we go, and then we'll have Q&A session towards the end of the session. We're going to kick off, I think, James, if you're there. He's really going to help. James McGee from Capgemini is going to set the scene really today and talk about the AI transformation in public services. So James, if you're there, hand over to you and perhaps walk us through where we are right now and what you think might be the future might hold as well. So James, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Thank you. So lovely to meet you all. I'm James McGee. I work at Capgemini Invent. I've been in the industry for about 12 years now, and I head up the automation practice here at Invent. What I want to walk you through today is a little bit about regulation, how far we've come with the UK government, the Centre for Data Ethics and Intelligence, but also what that means to us on the ground with our clients, the trends that we're seeing, and also why it's really important to focus on the accuracy that we're seeing in the industry trends. So regulation and innovation, they're often seen as sort of forces that are yin and yang to each other. Do they clash? Do they collaborate? But what we've started to see in 2021 is that actually that roadmap that came out, developing the sort of 6 principles that the UK was going to align itself on, how it was going to generate demand for reliable and effective assurance, develop some standards, and more importantly, accountability. We've really seen that sort of progress in the last 2 years. So in 2022, one of the things that we definitely sort of welcomed within the public sector's area is that actually we're not going to regulate the technology as heavy, we're going to regulate the use of that applicable technology, which I think is the right approach. I think it's on a case-by-case basis that actually the technology should be attributed to the right use case. And I think in March 23, Michelle Donnellan has really sort of expanded upon that, especially with Gen AI coming along, ChatGPT, various different embodiments of BERT, and other sort of large language models that we're seeing. So I feel like the regulation has been put on the right foot forward from a UK point of view. And sort of what that enables us to really look at is wider use cases on a case-by-case level. So if I'm to think about where we're going, what we're doing, everyone's talking about Gen AI, everyone's talking about ChatGPT, and often we can run before we walk, but some of the use cases that we can see across public sector are improving infrastructure, resilience, the war in Ukraine, our healthcare system. There are public services that are potentially cracking at the moment, and it's how do we sort of fill the void, that gap, that actually we're going to need to rely on some of this technology a bit more quickly than we thought we would need to. And it's how do we also reduce that carbon footprint. So there are so many different technologies that we're working with quite closely on our clients, looking at the art of the possible. If we're looking at frontline services, it's how do we improve healthcare? How do we improve call centers for people in need that urgently need care? Looking in the welfare system, how do we actually get turnaround times that much quicker? And using that technology is going to be really applicable. But there is one thing from the government's surveys and questionnaires that they've done with various different groups around the country is actually accuracy. Accuracy is the biggest thing that people have concerns around with these models, because we are humans and using artificial intelligence needs to be appropriately used within the context, within the correct use case. And some of the articles that I'm sure we'll be able to provide links to you later, it really gives what people are feeling on the ground as to actually Gen AI could be a really good thing, but obviously within the right use cases. Sometimes having a human in the loop, sometimes having more, of a handheld approach. So if I'm to look at where this sort of takes us, it's about focusing on the right things. And what I mean by the right things is the way that we interact with our different government bodies, whether that's welfare, whether that's defence, whether that's the health service, whether that's rail, whether that's infrastructure. We all interact with them in different ways, and we are a customer that lives in different process silos within their ecosystem. So you may phone up the call centre, and the call centre doesn't know what the back office knows. We live in about 4 or 5 different databases, and actually running to intelligent technologies like GPT, yes, it's a step in the right direction, but let's not run before we walk, because actually accuracy is the biggest thing that people from the public have a concern around these technologies. So it's about getting the right data from all the different channels that we could interact with the government with, whether I phone up a call center, I send an email, a freedom of information request, anything like that. It's how do we interpret that and centralize it? So how do we develop a customer status? Do we know where somebody is in their journey? And then actually understanding, right, now we know where they are in their journey, things like ChatGPT are going to be that much more useful because we've got the accuracy we need from the customer 360. I was going emails, calls, mails, and then sort of combining that with the element of ChatGPT is perhaps an approach that some government bodies have taken, but I would firmly recommend, and what we're always sort of focusing on, is how do we get the accuracy to ensure that what model we do put forward is regulatory compliant as well as fair, and it's also as accurate as it could be. Some of those feedbacks that we've seen in the government are, very, very real. So it's about adhering to the customer, ensuring that the customer experience is much better, and how do we improve our resilience. So if I'm to leave you with one message, you're only as good as your inputs. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hand off to Thomas to talk about a little bit around Hyperscience and where we go from here. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Really, really fascinating, kicking us off and talking about the white paper approach and where public sectors are. So, Thomas, I think you had a great headway in there, and over to you to kind of take us forward and talking about foundations to transformation. I hand the floor, as they say, over to you.
Amazing, no pressure. Excellent. So hi everybody, yes, my name's Thomas and I lead the public sector for Hyperscience. And I'll be talking exactly that, why AI-driven automation is different to current methods previously available, and hopefully covering one of the key concepts to why it's different and having such impact when transformations occur. And that is fundamentally the ability to tap into what was previously trapped data and then streamlining those processes, allowing for enhanced precision and accuracy. So artificial intelligence without the right data is just artificial. And as you can imagine, marketing loved this slide, but what I'm trying to get at here is that impactful AI transformation is based on the ability to use a wide range of data types. Adding additional data layers increases the accuracy of the model and eventually the impact that it has. But this is somewhat true for all transformation projects and automation products in the past. You're only really as good as the data that you have. You know, as James alluded to, garbage in, garbage out. But access to this data has historically been a challenge. Yes, we've made great strides in utilizing APIs and sharing data across systems, but if we refer to this as digital data, nice data that's accessible by a database and other applications, this only represents a small amount of data within the organization. And I think almost by design, public sector, unfortunately, are the heaviest affected by this. You know, having to cater for all ages and backgrounds and actively not wanting to exclude the digitally excluded, you're left with having to accept what is kind of referred to as unstructured data, and that is emails, documents, PDFs, images, and that represents a larger amount of data within the organization. So here's a report from Gartner that kind of illustrates that 80% of organizations' total data is unstructured. So how do you address this? So historically, organizations were trying to find efficient and effective ways of getting this data and parsing it through so it can be used downstream. Essentially, most processes start with collecting the data, making a decision based on that data, sharing that decision with the end user. Now, historically, that was done manually. People would receive these kind of documents, emails, type it out into a system. And I kind of laugh, and I shouldn't, because some organizations are still using that method. But there's still some steps forward in utilizing technology such as RPA and OCR. The challenge as such is they haven't quite addressed that challenge. So here's a kind of slide done by HFS Study, and they surveyed a bunch of CIOs from multiple organizations. And this was one of the stats that they pulled up. And 40% of purchased RPA licenses are actually then used, and only 6% of automation incentives meet clients' expectations. And I think a lot of this kind of boils down to, I mentioned, of course, accessing those unstructured data types, but digital transformation incentives have matured. And as they mature, the goalpost keeps moving. And we're no longer looking at trying to automate singular tasks. It's big, complex business processes. And these technologies by design just don't have the technology to do that. And this is fundamentally why AI-driven processing is different and will make the impact that we're going to discuss, and Chris will show you later on. If we look at those legacy technologies that I just described, they're very much rules-based, hard-coded templates. So if we look at kind of like RPA robots, it's basically they're extracting some data based on a pixel on a page. You have to hard code where that particular data is located and then trying to extract that. But as the process and the business evolves, those forms change, the way you extract that data changes, and then you're left still with manual processing. Most of the organizations that we discuss and have these kind of, should we say, proof of concepts and compare the technology against, 60 to 70% of the data these legacy tools are able to extract, and then there's still 30 to 40% that just isn't touched, or someone is manually having to intervene. And that's what hinders, should we say, the kind of next step in the growth of automation. With AI, you have that additional intelligence, machine learning, that can handle that additional 30 to 40%. It's flexible enough to capture content variation. So when we talk about, for example, invoices, we're not looking for a particular invoice number on a page by location, we're able to extract, contextualize the document and pick the information that's relevant. We're no longer looking for hard-coded templates. We're able to contextualize it and then use that intelligence further down the line. And it learns and adapts from the data. So if you think in terms of, okay, you receive different data formats and different types, well, you're going to have to kind of do that all again. No. Again, as mentioned, it has the intelligence now to pick that data and move forward. So historically, where a vendor may change a particular document, or for example, in the lens of public sector, you change the layout of a form, that's no longer going to be an issue or hinder process. We're able to address that. Now, I just want to show a slide that Gartner put up, and it's kind of around the dawn of an AI enterprise revolution. And you kind of see introductions of technologies on the left, and they're predicting that we're going to see kind of a 10-30% increase in efficiency through the introduction of AI technology. And they put here the kind of legacy tools that we mentioned, and we're going to overcome that. And we as a company are already seeing these levels of efficiency being achieved. So I'm just sharing here an example we recently did with an international shipping company, but they were able to, as you can imagine, with kind of customs invoices and packaging, which has the list of contents within ships, that varies from vendor, supplier, manufacturers, all over the place. And these previous tools were not able to do that. And they had huge teams of manual people typing in this data. You now don't have to do that with the introduction of AI. And we are seeing 10 times plus increase in efficiency. And through the lens of public sector, again, we recently did a process with a government organization that handles the tax. And one of their processes, typically, the tax return on savings, that was 25 minutes to process that. And now we're at a stage where we're able to do it in 2.5. I think it's key. Obviously, it's great to have these efficiencies, reduce costs. But when we're talking about public sector organizations, we're actually improving the service and lives that, taxpayers are paying for, right? So if you look at it in NHS, if you're able to get a result back on maybe a test or get an appointment quicker, it's fundamentally a better service. So I appreciate there's a lot of talk there around kind of concepts and how it works. So I'm going to hand over now to Chris to actually show you how this technology works in action and how we're able to achieve such high levels of efficiencies.
Thanks, Thomas, and really great segue into Chris Bloomfield from Hyperscience. Chris, I hope you're there. Please show us Hyperscience in action, really. Over to you. And just to remind people, stick your Q&A, your questions in the chat. I've got a few in there already, but keep them coming. And then after Chris, we'll have a bit of time for questions. Sorry, Chris, talking over you. Over to you.
No worries at all. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Chris Bloomfield, and I lead our pre-sales team for the international business at Hyperscience. So my role in today's webinar is to give you a very brief overview of how the platform works, and then bring that to life through a demo. The demo is specific, well, I'd like to think specific to UK public sector, and this is a firearms application and renewal process. So let me just move on very quickly to a slide that explains the Hyperscience platform in a little bit more context. So effectively, this is underpinned by what we class as a software development kit. And the notion is of a flow. Data flows in via an input connector. It then goes through a number of different blocks through the Hyperscience platform. We perform some level of action upon that platform and then derive an output that you can ingest into your downstream systems. The goal is, however, not to do this as quickly as possible. It's instead doing it as accurate as possible. And each of these individual models that we have here around classification, identification, and extraction have their own target accuracies. When a machine cannot meet a target accuracy, or when the AI predicts that for that particular task it cannot meet that target accuracy, it's smart enough to ask for human intervention. So, for example, if the machine cannot classify a document to target accuracy, it sends that to a human. Equally, from an identification point of view, i.e. where's the interest in data in the documentation, finally extracting that document. So with that said, I am going to share my screen. We're going to move into the demo itself. So if you just bear with me, I am going to just move my window. And I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully everyone should be able to see a box window. So I mentioned earlier that the scenario...
One second, I don't think we can see, at the moment, I'm just seeing the Hyperscience platform slide. I don't know if our wonderful folk behind the scenes can, sorry, Chris, just so we make sure that we're seeing what you're seeing, if that makes sense.
Okay, let me try sharing again. Sorry, everybody.
Oh, it's fine.
Yes, we can see it.
You can? Brilliant.
Yeah.
All right, go
Yeah.
ahead. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so if you bear with me, what I'm going to do, as I mentioned, this is a firearms application and renewal process. So kind of behind the scenes, I am an applicant and I have posted in my application form. I've asked my doctor to provide medical form, and I provided supporting information through passport photo. I've provided a check payment in there as well, and there's a cover letter. So this has now gone into the mailroom, and the mailroom staff will go and scan the document and upload that into their DMS. Here we're using Box. This could be any kind of DMS. It could be into SharePoint, for example. And what's happening here is that Hyperscience has been configured to listen to the document management store to pull in this bulk scan. So whilst we wait for Hyperscience to interact with Box, let's take a look at actually the documentation that has been scanned in and uploaded. So we can see here we've got a structured application form, and the guy in the post room or girl in the post room hasn't done exactly a fantastic job, right? It rips open the envelope, taken all the papers out and scanned it as quickly as it can. So some of it's, upside down. We can see actually from an applicant point of view, there's different colored handwriting, there's lowercase, there's some uppercase, there's sideways, and we can see as we scroll through the entire bulk scan, inserted in the middle here, we've got this unstructured handwritten cover letter in there, and we can see that there's a load of different sort of shadow on there as well, and that's inserted in the middle of these forms. And as we scroll through, we can see the doctor's form, this medical form in there. We can see some information pertaining this particular applicant. And lastly, we can see we've got the passport photo and the check. So I'm just going to close that down, and we're going to move over to the Hyperscience platform. And let me click on refresh, and we can see that we've got a status of processing for this particular application. So let's dive in to the submission itself. And we can see we've got a number of pages that are currently going through the process of classification. So I'll walk you through that kind of step-by-step view of the platform. Let's just take a look at it under the hood through what we class as the flow run. So this is the underlying flow, and I mentioned it's made up of individual blocks. So the first of that is the input, where we have the box folder listener. What we're able to do as well as part of the Hyperscience platform is load in information, whether that is loaded directly in via CSVs, or whether we can pull in information from APIs, external databases, etc. Here we've loaded the firearm rates through a CSV, and we can see that we've pulled in different values here. So whether it's renewal, whether it's a new grant, or whether it's a combination of both, and we've got the fiscal amounts there. Then the machine is going to do the standard IDP elements that I spoke about earlier. We're going to classify the document. We're going to identify where the interesting data is located. And lastly, we're going to transcribe that data. As I mentioned, each of these has an underlying ML model associated with them. If we think about traditional approaches to being able to extract data, this is an all or nothing approach. We'll classify it, we'll identify it, we'll transcribe it, and then we'll give you the output. Hyperscience has turned that round on its head. And it said, well, we don't want you to get an output of compounding errors. For example, if we get classification wrong, ergo identification transcription is going to be incorrect. So at each stage, if the machine doesn't think it can reach your target accuracy, then it's smart enough to hold its hand up. Sorry. We're going to get to a point where we're going through the machine transcription. And given this is a demo, we want to show you how human in the loop works and how simple it is for somebody within the local constabulary or whoever is owning this particular process, finds it to be able to interact with Hyperscience. So we'll just wait for a few more seconds and we'll come out of the machine transcription block into the manual transcription block. So I'm just going to close this particular window. And we can see here that all those individual pages have now been classified, and we've broken out the forms into the main body, the medical element, the equality form, the passport photo, and the checks. So irrespective of whether they were upside down, sideways, out of order, Hyperscience using computer vision and AI is able to pull together or pull apart all the different documents and pull them together into their component parts. We can see now the status of the submission has changed to that of a manual transcription task. So now I'm going to be performing human in the loop because the machine cannot reach the target accuracy on 2 of the fields that are contained within this document. Now, if we notice here, the machine has actually just zoomed in into a specific area of the form. If we think traditional approaches, we have the entire form after the fact, and humans being humans, we just tend to read the entire form. But with this, we narrow in and we just target that specific area. So my role is just tell the machine, this is 6 foot 1 inch. And then we're going to the work address and say that's J.A. Chase, pin, and unit form. And that's it. That's all I need to do in order to help the machine be able to transcribe all of the details across all of these forms. So now we're going to be going beyond just that intelligent document process and the core classification, identification, and extraction. And let's just jump back to the flow run itself. And we can see we're now going beyond the transcription block, and we're going to be going through a number of different steps. So if you recall, within the document packet that was supplied, there was a cover letter, and we want to be able to do full page transcription. We want to read what's actually in that letter, and then we want to derive what's happening in that letter. So let's do text classification. So this is kind of sentiment analysis. What's in that letter? Is there a complaint? Is it positive? Is it negative? It could be any kind of classes that you wish Hyperscience to be able to extract for you. And then we start building out the JSON file. So this JSON file is what will be used to populate your downstream systems. And then we're starting to enrich that JSON file. We can see each block as it's being processed turning green. So we're looking for specific keywords that might exist in the unstructured data that might highlight a particular issue. We look in here for also PII-based information through NER and CED, so named entity recognition, for longer-term archiving for things like redaction. We're also adding collation logic. So can we create cases with Hyperscience? Yes, we can. So if you've got a case management system at the front end or the back end, Hyperscience can map directly into that case system. Then we're doing just some customized logic. Are all the documents present within this particular application? So for example, if it is a renewal, is there a copy of the shotgun certificate or the firearm certificate? Have any applications been previously made and been rejected? So we're doing a lookup into the back-end database, yes or no. Has correct payment been received? Are there any medical issues highlighted? And then if there are things that we believe that should be surfaced to a human to make a decision about this particular process, then we can create a fully customizable interface. That's what we call custom supervision. And lo and behold, as a demo, we will be showcasing that. So I'm just going to come out of here, and we're going to go into perform tasks. And what we'll see when we go into this customized supervision screen is going to be 3 panels. Draw your attention to the right-hand side. We can see that this is a first review, and Hyperscience has pulled in a number of different warnings to this assessor about this particular application. We can see, some expected documents are missing, please see below. We've got previous certificate as this is a renewal. Indeed, we can see that the applicant has ticked renewal, therefore we're missing the certificate. We've also got things like medical issues that have been found. The supplied fee is incorrect, and also there's negative sentiment in the cover letter. So I can have a look, at this form. I can see here, yes, indeed, there's depression, anxiety being ticked by the doctor. Now I can scroll through and I can see, from a check point of view, yes, that is £62 and not the £90 that we've pulled in. And then, I can read that letter as well. So actually, from an applicant point of view, this isn't a great application. So I'm going to make the decision to reject this out of hand. So I'm going to click on complete task. And what we're now going to be doing is going beyond just providing the JSON file. We're going to mimic contact center functionality. So we're going to provide just-in-time application updates to the applicant through the form of SMS, through the form of phone calls, and also emails. So we can do, sort of a multi-channel approach. So if we wait just for a few more seconds, hopefully in the back end, this will liven up and I will receive an inbound call giving me a status update of this particular application. And the silence is deafening. But as we wait for that to come in and wait for that to be processed, let's take a look into one of the documents that has been split apart. So we can see here, we've got the handwriting. One of the things that will typically trip up, typical OCR technologies, things around, addresses. It's written there, with 111 Blair Hill. Is that an I? Is that an L? Is that a 1 on a character by character basis? This could be deemed inaccurate, but the machine has context behind it. It understands what it is that it's extracting. And if we just take a look at something that I helped the machine with, we can see here on the right-hand side, we've got full audit trail perspective, and we can see, my name is in there. So if you do need that audit trail, who's been touching this document, who has provided that transcription, then Hyperscience can provide you all of that information. So lastly, we are able to redact the documentation. So let's just take a look at the output. So this is the output that we derive, and I'm just going to show you in here what we've got from the perspective of the full-page transcription. We can see here, this is what we've written, read from the letter and transposed from the letter. And let's just go and have a look at, what's in here from, a redaction. And let's take a look at the predictions. And these are the predictions that have been provided by the NER models. We've got the sentiment analysis models. And finally, as we scroll through, towards the bottom, we come up with the redaction or the redacted PDF. And whilst that's downloaded, here's one that was created earlier of the redaction. We can see every field in all of the documents that may contain PII information has been redacted at source for your longer term archiving, including that, of your supporting information. So whether, you've got your checks, whether you've got your handwritten structured forms. So with that said, I'm going to pause there, and I am going to stop sharing my screen. And Sue, I guess it's back to you.
Thank you, Chris. Really fascinating demo, and really brought to life the approach that you're taking. And also, we had a question in the chat earlier around why is the human in the loop a specific goal? Should whether a human in the loop or not be an emergent property of an empirical efficiency rather than a specific design goal? But I think, Chris, what you've just demonstrated is why that human in the loop ability ability is key to addressing what others and James was talking about around data accuracy. Is that how you would answer that, is why the human in the loop is a specific goal here?
Yeah, absolutely. So our goal is to try to automate wherever we can, okay, and reduce the burden on humans. But we are very clear that machine learning is not a perfect science. And we want to ensure that we are giving you the most accurate data, because once we start polluting your downstream systems with bad data, you make bad decisions on that data. And therefore bringing humans actually inside of Hyperscience where only it makes sense. So if the machine just cannot complete that task based on your target accuracy, offer that up to a human instead of making an educated guess.
And I'm kind of starting a bit of a discussion here with all of you, because the questions we've had in are great because they touch on different aspects of what we've been talking about. And I don't know if, James, if I could bring you in, because you talked about regulation and the government's approach here, and the human in the loop also has a touch point there as well. I'm thinking, the kind of the GDPR conversations that we've had, and now we're talking about the kind of AI regulation, and that having a human in the loop, having that ability to, accountability is one of the principles of the government's bringing in, as well as transparency and fairness. So that human in the loop aspect is important to that discussion as well. Would you say? Would you agree?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, it's not to be just the toolbox, it's a tool to lean on. So how do we enable frontline workers? How do we enable key infrastructure workers to have the tools that they need to do the job with overburden, with financial pressures from the government? There's not enough funds for the people that are needed to do specific jobs. And, there's a reputation to uphold of the governmental services there for accuracy. So if we start presenting technologies that, do a lot of things well, but ultimately, ostracize a particular type of demographic, then, it's not setting off on the right foot. So it should be an accuracy first led model. And that should be handheld by humans to start with in order to give it the confidence that, we start to reduce that threshold of intervention. What I'd probably add to it is I spoke a little bit about customer status. What we are looking at here from a technology point of view is giving us insight into those analog channels which were previously transcribed or looked at by humans, reviewed by humans. And if you feel that, 30-40% of calls are maybe about the status of something, if we're now rendering that data that previously existed in a letter or a complaint or a Freedom of Information Act and that's being chased, we don't really need to look at the handoffs between the human interventions anymore. We can surface that. And even if we want to take it to the GBT lens, we're not feeding it garbage in, as Thomas alluded to earlier. So this is a game changer. This brings out data that we weren't previously able to get access to quickly, efficiently, and also at a point whereby we're now reducing the customer sort of experience, like reducing the amount of days we might spend in any given case.
It does really feel like we're on a step change, right? We're about to move into a really different phase of what we've been talking about for a long time. With these technologies now are really powerful in the way that they can enable all this to happen in a way that we've not seen before. But I actually wanted to follow up with Thomas, if I may, because James is talking there about the kind of processes, and Chris has outlined here kind of the forms and how you scan these. And I'm just wondering with my head on as well, as we're moving more, and I don't know if Thomas, if you're there, if we're moving more towards a digital first approach where it might not be a check, it might not be a form, it might be data is extracted in a different way, perhaps James through, a kind of a chat bot or a chat GPT approach. Do you think then that some of these issues and some of these challenges that we've talked about today will go away? And it kind of linked to that, Thomas, we had a question of should we be thinking about optimizing processes to avoid as much requirement for individuals to interact with the process itself, which is kind of the same. Should we, if we're more thinking of digital first processes, then how does that change, or do these issues go away? What would you say to that?
Yeah, quite a lot to unpack there.
Sorry, that's a huge question. That could be a webinar all in itself. I'm sorry, Thomas, to do that to you, but just really keen to your thoughts.
So look, I think fundamentally, right, it's 2023. We shouldn't have any paper, right? But we've been trying to get rid of paper for decades, and it's stayed. And in an ideal world, all organizations would be able to safely and interact with each other and share this kind of structured data. But the reality is we're very far from achieving that. And if you take, for example, the MOD, are they likely to? They don't even share much data with internal government agencies, let alone external parties. So you're still then left with anyone that deals with these organizations that you're having to provide that upfront data, and that typically is in the format that we just described, kind of emails, documents, and even internally, right? If you think of even just like applying for a job, you're still submitting, okay, I need to share my CV, I need to share my educational background and all that. These external parties are unlikely to ever kind of communicate with one another anytime soon. So in the absence of just waiting till that happens, we need an intermittent step that can handle these unstructured data, which as I mentioned, formulates most of the organization. So a method of addressing that for sure.
Great answer to a really stinking question. So apologies, that's my fault completely. So we've got lots of questions, which is brilliant. Some refer to the demo. So Chris, a few of these may be on you. I'm going to throw a few in the mix as well, so we don't run out of time. And I think some of them we may have got answered, but awesome questions, everybody. Thank you. So we had a question with any this is a question with any of the machine learning steps, such as transcription. Is there a risk that the model is very confident that it has successfully transcribed some text, but then it's actually made a mistake? And I suppose you kind of addressed that, Chris, in the demo in terms of that's the human in the loop. But then we had a related question, I think, and forgive me for putting these questions together, but for things like address, would it then, I suppose the model, would it then validate the address with a postcode lookup? So talking about, kind of that accuracy of that data again, I don't know, Chris, if you want to talk to either of those questions.
Yeah, sure. I think there's also an additional question in there about the learning extracted from human intervention.
And what about bias as well? How do you, what steps do you take to try and limit built-in bias in AI? Because it comes back to this data accuracy, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would say around bias is that this is trained on your data to start with, right? So you have that full audit trail. So that's number one. Number two is that we have an inbuilt quality assurance mechanism. So this may answer the question about learning directly from humans. So when we have this human in the loop, that's the kind of the end-to-end process of Hyperscience. We do not take that human intervention as verbatim, right? That is correct. What we do instead, we send that to an asynchronous quality assurance process. And effectively, we get a QA team, a quality assurance team, to mark the homework of both the machine and both of the human in the loop. Now, if they are correct, fantastic. We have what we call consensus. And with consensus, we feed that back into the model and the machine confidence will rise. And when the machine confidence rises, the more chance it has of automating that task next time round. But equally, the machine may get it wrong, right? It's not a perfect science, as I mentioned earlier on, in which case, through QA, the human will turn around and say, hey, machine, you got that wrong. Again, we don't take that first human's word for it. We send that to a second human and say, hey, do you have consensus between the humans? Now, if they do, fantastic, the machine is wrong. And then the machine confidence will lower. So the next time the machine is performing that task, it may well send that particular task to a human instead. And that enables Hyperscience to always hit your target accuracies without drifting too far positive and too far negative.
Okay, so does that answer the question then? We had a question, does the model update itself on manual interventions? It sounds like that's that process for letting that happen.
That's correct, yes. So, through the QA mechanism rather than that human in the loop mechanism, that's what feeds back into that model and it learns from that human interaction. Yeah. Now, we can also negate the need to go to human in the loop as well. So the question around doing validation of postcode lookups. So through the flows engine, we can integrate into backend APIs, whether, there could be a Royal Mail API. So we take the postcode, we validate that against the Royal Mail API, we pull in the address information. And instead, with handwriting, instead of sending that to a human, maybe we just say, actually, we'll take this as the verbatim single source of truth, and we use that instead. And that further, drives up automation rates whilst pinning us at that target accuracy.
Great, Chris. Really great. I'm going to carry on with the questions if I may, because we've got some really great ones in. And this is one I've been thinking about more, and James has talked about, and others have talked about ChatGPT and the kind of, it's very much text driven right now, right? And as we're talking about, of course, and we will see that change, right? We're already talking in the industry about what happens next with these models and where we're going. So there was a question of, can the technology incorporate transcripts of phone calls? So thinking audio now, not just text. That's where I think that's an interesting conversation. This is to ensure that all needs of, I think it's healthcare, so in the healthcare space are covered. So I wonder if that's something that either it can do now or something that you think maybe along the lines, Chris, or Thomas, of course, come in, please.
Yeah, so I think this is a great question. This is moving away from, core intelligent document processing into the realms of intelligent content processing. So let's go beyond, standard documents. The question itself specifically talks about audio transcripts, which would be a document effectively, in Hyperscience would, natively be able to process that and extract information. But if we wanted to expand beyond that and into content, and your view there, around large language models, Hyperscience takes an agnostic approach to large language models. We believe, we can augment our platform using LLMs, and the ability to call out to a ChatGPT or integrate into Llama or whatever kind of LLM model that you want to use. Hyperscience is fully supportive of that. We are obviously concerned around data privacy, so our approach has always been, we train on your data. You have that full audit trail. You're not quite sure, the efficiency, effectiveness of, external large language models. How have they been trained? Is there inherent bias? Are there hallucinations? Used in the right way, coupled with that Hyperscience kind of closed loop ethos, can bring, great rewards to public sector organizations.
Yeah, got it, Chris. Thank you so much for that. It's really, really topical right now, so it's really useful. So I had a key question that's popped in, and I think I want to take it now, given what we've just been talking. Sorry, somebody else put something in. Please, could you expand a little bit more on how you limit bias? And this is obviously a really key issue, right? The fact that the process is trained on our data doesn't necessarily limit the bias. What if our existing data, legacy data, is biased and we're aware of this? What about biases we're not aware of in our data? That could be a webinar all in itself as well, Chris, right? In terms of the challenges around data bias that we have. But I don't know if you or any of the other speakers want to talk to that one.
Yeah, so I can take this one for certain. So it's a great question. How do you eliminate bias in your own data? To your point, this could be a separate webinar. All we can do right now with Hyperscience is where we train, directly on your data. Your people are annotating those documents. So if you know that bias exists, you would train you train the model in such a way that bias is removed. We also have inherent ML techniques when we are training and developing models to check for things, such as anomalies within the data. For example, one annotator might say the interesting data is here. Another annotator might say the interesting data is over here, in which case the machine learning model may drift. It might become more confident that data is in one location when it should actually be in another location. But as I said, Sue, this is something that probably take offline and discuss in greater detail.
It's a big, it's an important topic. It's a great question, but it's a big one as well. So we had, sorry, Chris, they all seem to be coming to you, but I think it's spurred on by the demo. So we had a question around liability. In the example of the firearm application, if the application later turns out to be fraudulent and the human in the loop played a minor part in the review process, who or what is culpable for the error? And I suppose this is that a question, or is that an issue that in that situation, regardless of whether you're using AI or not, then you would have the same challenges or the same question, I suppose?
Yes, I would agree with that. I don't think the culpability would be necessarily on, Hyperscience there to detect the fraud. we would, work with, the local constabularies in order to be able to determine where in the document, certain hooky behavior it could lie, and then flag that up into that customized supervision interface. Furthermore, if there are external tools that specialize in detecting fraud, we could integrate with those and use those to make to form part of that overall decisioning process.
Yeah. Okay, I had a question. I might direct this one to Thomas actually, because it's on the efficiency and the kind of the benefits, I suppose, and the impact for public sector bodies. With 3-line HITL for validation, but this could be broader. Do you have data that this does reduce staffing levels and human workload for both operations and administrations of the system? So, Chris, please feel free to come in as well. But Thomas, I don't know if that's a question you could talk to as well around, the impact and the impact and the benefits to bodies of reducing staff levels, increased efficiency of this kind of approach and this kind of model. So either Chris or Thomas, I don't know who might want to pick that one up.
Yeah, sure. I will start, and then Chris can finish.
Fair enough. Give Chris a break for a minute.
Yeah. So I think if I've understood the question correctly, for example, we did the Veterans Affairs, a huge organization in the US, and they deal with, as name on the tin, veterans that are injured at war and they need to claim disability allowance, all that kind of good stuff. Now, historically, what they do is they would collect information from veterans, and that's forms, and they have to then share lots of information detailing, okay, when it happened, parties involved, and that then needs to be validated. Now, historically, that was a 4-month process, and they've been able to reduce that now down to 4 minutes. They themselves have seen a saving of, I think it's like £45 million, and they've been able to move. Double check this, seeing as this is recorded, but they're now reallocating, tens of thousands of staff to different tasks. And we have other customers with very similar metrics and proof points. So if the question's more around, do you have proof around the validation and perceived effects? Yes, we do. Happy to discuss that. It really depends on what the organization's trying to achieve, because sometimes it's just making the process quick, not so that you're reducing humans, but ultimately whoever the end user is, they're able to get that result significantly quicker. And in the healthcare space, depending on what that scenario is, it can literally be life or death, right? So it's not always about reducing staff levels, but that is one outcome that can be achieved.
Thank you, Thomas. Chris, anything you wanted to come in on?
I would echo exactly what Thomas mentioned there. We did a relatively recent POC with a UK public sector organisation where they were hitting exception rates on structured handwritten forms, about sort of 40 to 50%. We demonstrated very clearly with the Hyperscience approach using human in the loop that we could take the number of FTEs involved there from about 30 down to 3. Wow. And that was just on one small area of the business. So the Hyperscience approach is definitely superior.
Wow, great stats, thank you. So we've got 5 minutes left, and we've got a few more questions in the chat. I think I've tried to get to most of them, and forgive me if I've missed some. There's been some cracking questions. I'm just going to pause and see if any of our speakers, because I was just going to ask them for any final words. So just in the last 5 minutes that we've got. So perhaps, guys, any final thoughts or final words that you want to get across, or any questions that we haven't got to that you just want to very quickly address before we close? Chris, I'm going to come to you last because I feel like I've brought a lot to you. So James, can I maybe go with you first? Any final words, any messages you want to leave the audience with, or any of the questions that we haven't got to that you just wanted to jump in on? Perhaps hand over to you first, and then I'll come to Thomas, and then we'll finish with you, Chris, if that's okay. James, are you there?
I am, yes, thanks. So what I'd probably just leave you with is that obviously from a public service point of view, all channels of communication needs to be available to the majority of the people that interact with the government. So whether that's a web form, whether that's an email, whether that's a phone call, but also they have the right to communicate to the government via a letter. that level of sort of SLA is still needing to be preserved in the same way that a phone call would. So let's bring the level of service up to where it needs to be from a white mail point of view, but also looking at that we're a long way off moving away from paper. I was in a hospital, I think it was a couple of days ago, and I was just watching the amount of paper that was being shuffled from room to room. You think of the health and safety processes that we see in government. You look at the infrastructure, the sign-offs that need to be done. There's so much paper out there, and it's not just about the paper. It's about the dynamic PDFs, the virtual PDFs that exist out there that are still going to need human intervention to actually look at what is written in that document to then perform an action in a caseload management tool, a reply to an email, an update to a legacy system, a reply to some sort of work allocation flow to tell the call center to call somebody back. So I definitely think there's still a whole host of use cases that we haven't even touched yet. So that's what I'd leave you with.
More to discuss, more webinars to come then, I'm sure. Thomas, I'll hand over to you. Final thoughts, final messages, or any of the questions we haven't got to that you're dying to answer?
Well, how to narrow it down? There's been quite a lot of questions in there, and I kind of want to address some of the ones I don't think we really covered, because some of it's around kind of questions around risk and liability, and they're very interesting. And I think in this dawn of AI, that actually trying to understand where we are with that, I don't think we know, right? We're still learning, and I know that we've had some conversations and there's frameworks in place around trying to understand where that liability is. I think as it stands from a Hyperscience perspective, there's big audit trail around who makes decisions, so you can see who's done that. And then I think Chris alluded to, but we didn't really get time to dive into it. The model and the AI we provide to customers, and they can run that on-prem. We're not talking about a black box somewhere that they can't handle. So you have access to it, and you can see how it works and how it comes to these kind of conclusions. So, coming to that conclusion, you could maybe look at, okay, where does the risk or liability lie? Similarly with the bias, we've got reports, so you can see and maybe train that out. Appreciate I've gone down a massive tangent there, but I think it's new technology, new approach, and there's lots of exciting questions out there that I wish we could have answered.
I would say, please don't worry, everybody. We will definitely be talking about these issues again going forward. So more to be discussed. I agree, Thomas, but thank you so much. And then Chris, final words from you, or any of the questions that you didn't get to answer that you're really dying to. Over to you.
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, it's more of a call to action of the audience. Hyperscience, I work in the pre-sales team. We deliver, demos, we deliver technical deep dives, we deliver, business cases and POCs, right, on a day in, day out basis, demonstrating that the Hyperscience approach is far superior to that of existing technologies out there. So please, after, this webinar, take a thought, think about how Hyperscience could be applicable to use cases that you're trying to solve for. And my team and I will be more than happy to work alongside you to prove the business case and prove this technology really does work.
Thank you, Chris. And a great call to, I love it when we end up on a call to action, because that means that we can take the conversation forward. And there's so much more to be discussed here. But I'm afraid we've come to the end of our hour. It always goes so quickly. But this is not the end of the conversation. I would say to all of you, it's merely only just the beginning. So please come and get involved in Tech UK's work on AI, not just looking at a regulation, as Jane talked about, but adoption. How do we get this right for the UK? How do we get this right for the UK public sector and all organisations as well? And all the topics and issues that you talked about were in the brilliant questions are definitely ones that we are looking at here at Tech UK. So come and get involved. But with that, I would say if you want to come and get more involved in Tech UK's work, reach out to me or reach out to any of my team. How can we help? But thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to Hyperscience for a supporting and enabling this conversation to happen. It's really, really vital right now. And I would say, I can already see the virtual clapping, so please thank virtually our wonderful speakers. So Chris Bloomfield, Senior Director of Solution Engineering at Hyperscience, James McGee, Senior Manager at Capgemini, and Thomas Redhead, Account Executive at Hyperscience. Thank you so much to everybody for attending. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.